Hey, what's going on, Tamers? It's me, East, and this past weekend, or I guess current weekend if you're a YouTube channel member, I'm competing at EVO Japan, the largest fighting game event in Japan. The past few weeks I've been working really hard and practicing quite a bit with my Jury in Street Fighter 6 and my Catalina in Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, and honestly, I'll consider this a successful venture if I can just get out of my first set of pools. But we'll see, step by step. So whether you're a die-hard fighting game fan or just have a passing interest in fighting games at all, I definitely recommend you check out the EVO Japan stream. Lord Seiji, do me a favor and throw up a link somewhere of where the stream will be. I'll put one in the description below as well, just so you can easily copy pasta that. Anyway, we're in our 4th week of events over here in Japan for the BT17 Secret Crisis meta, and while I think that the top end of lists have become a little bit more solidified, a little bit more rigid, the bottom end of lists are still up to a lot of experimentation, and what's cool is that we're starting to see those lists pop up in different places, not only in Japan, but also outside of Japan, even just one day apart. That being said, let's check out some tournament results, a couple of key takeaways, and a close look at some of the decks that topped over the course of the past week. Diving into last week's result, it looks like Ancient Garurumon's 2-week streak of running the show has finally come to a close thanks to the week 1 dominator that is Imperial Dramon. Keep in mind that the numbers here are actually really tight. We're talking like 10 wins to 9 wins, so yeah, it's not like there's a huge gap between these two. And speaking of not a large gap between decks, if you take a look at the champion level and above, these should look like some pretty familiar faces. Things like Fenrir Lucemon, Numamon, as well as Magnamon Armor, and Dex Dorogoromon. But as we look at the rookie levels and below, there's a lot more variance to be had. Something I want to highlight this week that I thought was really cool was the emergence of this Leopardmon list that you see here at the rookie level. What's really interesting about this is that it popped up in Indonesia and Japan just one day apart, with the Japanese winner winning one of the Evolution Cups, one of the first stage qualifiers for the World Championships for the Japan area. While I did mention that the top end is Leopardmon, I think it's the bottom end that's definitely going to surprise you, so stay tuned. Additionally, if you watched last week's video, then you know that Tyrant Kabuterimon re-emerged after some minor deck optimizations after this long silence, and it continues to see some use this past week as well. And then dropping down to the in-training level, we see decks like 7 Great Demon Lords, Gallantmon, as well as Greymon. I'm pretty sure that this Greymon build was focused on Black War Greymon, if memory serves me correctly, alongside a really interesting Jesmon deck that had a hell of a run in a tournament where it had to fight and win against 2 Magnamons, an Omnimon deck, a Greymon deck, and a 7 Great Demon Lords deck, which honestly for Jesmon, that's not using a lot of the new cards, is pretty impressive. And finally, the last list I want to touch on this week is this really interesting Lucemon control deck where it utilizes a lot of the 7 Great Demon Lords, but it's not a 7 Great Demon Lords deck per se. Anyway, stay tuned because we're going to take a look at that list a little bit more depth as well. The first deck that we're going to take a close look at this week is going to be one that's been highly requested in the comments these past couple of weeks, and that is the Dorogoromon deck. Keep in mind that this deck did receive a lot of support in the BT17 set in the inclusion of the Dex cards in the form of Dex Dorogomon here at level 4, Dex Dorogreymon at level 5, and the very potent, very powerful Dex Dorogoromon at level 6. Now, right now, it feels like there's 2 ways that you can run this deck. The first is the one that you see here, using a Dorumon lower end as well as the black SOC Tamers in Marvin as well as Kosuke. And the other version utilizes the Lucemon cards, the purple Lucemon cards on the lower end, as well as a mix of the AG Tamer as well as the Cracker Fang Tamer introduced in BT17. And while the purple Lucemon focused list tends to go for a bit more burst damage using the Alliance keyword from the Tamers, this list that you see here is a bit more control focused, using things like piercing as well as the destruction effects from the Dex cards to control the board. The level 3s for the deck all serve very interesting but also different purposes. For example, the BT9 Dorumon here lets you draw a bit more by discarding an X antibody card in your hand whenever he's played. The perfect targets for that are the Dex cards in the form of the Dex Dorogoromon here, the Dex Dorogreymon here, as well as the Dex Dorogoromon at level 6. This way, whenever your level 4, 5, or 6 would die in the Dorogoromon, Dorogomon, or the Dorogreymon, they could just digivolve into those Dex cards from the trash for free. The BT7 Dorumon you see here is more of a searcher. Keep in mind, he can search pretty much anything in the deck, with the exception of the Tamers, which honestly sometimes hurts whenever you have to bottom deck, for example, 2 Tamers in one go. However, he kind of makes up for that in the fact that whenever you slot a Tamer up underneath him for a Mind Link or the X Antibody Proto form, you're going to get +1 memory that turn. While on the subject of slotting Tamers underneath every single turn, the Dorimon lets you draw an extra card whenever you do that, so essentially you get 2 draws every single turn once you have a Digimon on the board with a level 2 under it. There's a lot of ways that decks can get around the destruction protection that this deck provides in the form of the Dex cards, but the Dorumon at level 3s here from the BT16 set is a great way to counter and stop all of that. Basically, he says that whenever you slot the Tamer up underneath him from your hand during the start of the main phase, you basically can only be removed from the board by being destroyed. The level 4 Dodogomon from BT16 is actually one of the more useful cards in the deck. In fact, it's probably one of the more useful SOC cards that are even out there. Right now, this card is even used in the Fender Lucemon deck sometimes because it's so good. It sports the keyword collision, which means whenever it attacks, your opponent is forced to block with something if they have something on board. And then whenever it's played or digivolved into, you can trash a card in hand. Again, a great target for the dex cards in the deck to draw one extra card. And then if you have a Tamer underneath it, you can taunt your opponent. So again, lots of controlling elements with this card being able to force blocks as well as force attacks. And we'll see why that's important when we get to level 5. Looking at the dex cards for level 4, you have two great options. The first one being the BT9 Dex Dodogomon, who can give you memory back whenever you trash the next antibody card in hand for the evolution. And then you also get block and retaliation if you have a Dodogomon in his sources. The other option is the new Dex Dodogomon. It allows your level 6s to swing and then swing again, and then you can restand to block later on. But more importantly, whenever your Dodogomon on the board would be deleted by an effect, you can digivolve into the Dex Dodogomon from your trash and then prevent the deletion, which means it stays on the field. This is a way to save your level 4 and basically get another lease on life. And then whenever you do digivolve into this guy, depending on if you have a Tamer or not in his sources, you're going to either be able to draw an extra card by discarding a card, or you can destroy a 4-cost or lower Digimon on the board. And while normally this I think would be pretty weak, there are some really good targets in ace cards that are fantastic. The level 4 and level 5 in this deck kind of set up this nice 1-2 punch where the Dodogomon can essentially taunt one of your opponent to attack at the start of their main phase, and then the Dodogreymon with the Tamer underneath him can block, and his abilities when he has a Tamer in his sources and he blocks, or an attack is redirected, you can evolve him into level 6 for free. His inheritance also works really well with the AG cards or the Cracker Fang cards because he allows you to play another Digimon on the board whenever something is destroyed, which means you can essentially punch something, play another Digimon whenever you destroy something, and then you can attack again because it becomes unsuspended because of the Dodogomon. Neither here nor there, we'll get there in a second. And then you can attack with Alliance for the second hit. On top of that, if for some reason he would be deleted by some effect on board and you have the Dex Dodogreymon in trash, you can also just digivolve into that from the trash for free and then prevent the deletion. And while he is similar to the Dex Dodogomon that we saw at level 4 from the BT17 set, he sports a similar effect as the Dex Dodogomon at level 4 by being able to either discard a card and draw an extra card, or destroy a cost 6 or lower Digimon on the board whenever he has a Tamer or doesn't have a Tamer underneath him. And then finally, at your level 6s here, you've got Dodogomon, who is kind of like the king of the show. He has Collision, which forces an opponent's Digimon to block. He also can destroy an active Digimon or Tamer whenever he's evolved into, and then whenever another Digimon is destroyed, he can become unsuspended. All these effects with the culmination of the piercing or jamming or blocker and reboot, and the plus 1000s that he gets from all the various cards in the deck, means that he becomes a force to be reckoned with on the board. And then if your opponent would take him out, they have to deal with the Dex Dodogoromon instead. Dex Dodogoromon being able to digivolve from trash for free to prevent a deletion, and then he's going to de-digivolve 3, and then delete all of your opponent's Digimon with the lowest cost on board. And then similar to the Dodogoromon on board, whenever some other Digimon is destroyed, he can become active again once per turn. With all these things together, it's really easy to see why this deck can set up control on the board so quickly once they get to the level 6. The turn he comes down, if they have the Dodogomon effect active, you can only destroy him by destroying him on board. You can't like bounce him to hand or bounce to the deck or anything like that. And you basically have to deal with him and then also deal with the resulting Dex Dodogoromon who would come after that. Honestly, for me, in the BT17 set, this is the most interesting deck to play with, just because it feels like there's so many options this deck has, it feels like you're never really out of the game. So these next two lists we're going to take a look at are honestly something pretty special, and I say that because they probably hold joint first place for the worst pictures taken by a card shop I've ever seen. I'm talking like super crunchy picture quality, glares everywhere. It's honestly just like an abomination to the eyes. So to save everyone out there from having to figure out what these cards are, I have painstakingly gone through and figured out and put together a list that is a little bit more readable for the folks out there. The first list we're going to look at is going to be the Leopardmon list that I talked about before. This one, the level 3s are completely dominated by Wormmon, who can all DNA Digivolve, or mostly all DNA Digivolve with the exception of the BT16 one here at the end of the turn. You've got the Wormmon here who can search out a 2-color blue or green. This is the promo Wormmon, I believe, from the O2 beginning movie. Then you've got the Searcher Wormmon here who can search out a free trait or a Davis or Kin Tamer, which he's going to be able to search out all the Tamers here, the Davis and Kin, who were introduced in BT16, I believe it was, and are incredibly useful. Alongside them, we've got the other Piledramon cards for the Piledramon package, things like the Stingmon here, as well as the low-cost Stingmon whenever you have a blue Digimon on board. You got the XVmon, who also gives memory on DNA Digivolve, like the other Stingmon over here. And then a couple copies of the Togemogumon, who can source strip things, and then has armor and blocker. Once you get to the level 5s though, you've got the Digimon here for a little bit of aggression, and he can also source strip stuff and free stuff on board. And then you're going to get access to, on the top end here, the Leopardmon and the Leopardmon X antibody, alongside things like Cherubimon Ace and the Saint Gargamon, or the Mega Gargamon Ace. Now the idea here, I think, is to get to your level 6 and then use the power of, you know, the Digimon freezing everything on board alongside the Leopardmons to play other stuff out in order to get to one of the other Ace cards here, in order to get to the Ultimate Chaosmon at the end of the turn. And so while I do think it's difficult to get the stretch goal of the Ultimate Chaosmon to get the Security Attack +3 and Piercing, honestly, getting a 16k Digimon who can bottom deck stuff whenever he's Digivolved into, and then has partition for 2 level 6s, and whenever one of the level 6s comes down, it's going to be an Ace card, so you're going to get a nasty little effect off of it, is pretty terrifying. The other option for the deck is keeping true to its Piledramon or Imperial Dramon roots here. You've got the one copy of the Imperial Dramon Paladin mode, just as a way to finish off boards if they decide to go wide, and because your Piledramons can already source strip stuff, and then Imperial Dramon Paladin mode also source strip stuff, like, you're basically just getting a bunch of free hits. The one worry that I had when I was looking at this deck, looking at the list anyway, is that the kind of like the keystones for the deck, the Leopardmon, who kind of enable the rest of the level 6s and then the Ultimate Chaosmon cards, aren't easily searchable by pretty much anything in the deck. You've got the Wormmon here who searches 2-color Digimon, you've got the Wormmon here who searches free traits or Imperial Dramon, neither of which are Leopardmon. So you're mostly relying on the card draw from evolutions, as well as cards like the Demi-Vmon here, who are going to give you a green card whenever, who are going to give you draw 1 whenever you have a green card on board. However, these DNA Digivolve decks do tend to have quite a bit of draw power inherently, and, you know, things like the 2 Digivolutions you're going to need to get to the DNA Digivolve anyway. The DNA Digivolve is an extra draw. You got the level 2 Demi-Vmon I mentioned before. You've also got the Stingmon Inheritance effect, who can just let you draw whenever you attack, and that's a boon, honestly, because the Piledramon is going to be able to swing twice anyway. And so hopefully if you can pick up the pieces with that, then everything's smooth sailing. And the last list that we're going to take a look at today is going to be the Lucemon control deck that I mentioned at the start of the video. I'm going to save you from the 144p quality picture that these folks took, and I'm going to, like the other Leopardmon deck, give you something a little bit more readable here. And this deck is actually really interesting. It uses or focuses on the Lucemon cards here as kind of like the engine, and then you use like the other lower end level 3 cards, as well as some of the Tamers and things like the Analog Youth and the Mako Tamer, to quickly cycle through cards and get the cards you need, and then set up those cards in the trash. That way, once you get to your kind of heavy Lucemon, at 5 costs essentially, you can go into a Lucemon Chaos mode, and then once Chaos mode is removed from the board in some way, Hit's effect lets you essentially play another 7th Grade Demon Lords card on the board. And this is really nice because you can just use the Chaos mode really flexibly and just choose the 7th Grade Demon Lord who's going to be the best fit for the situation you're currently in. You've got Beelzemon who can Digivolve and has Rush. You've got Lilithmon who can give opponents Digimon the effect to destroy themselves. And then once something's destroyed, she can just pop a security off the top of your opponent's security stack. You've got Leviamon who just eats through boards and then has security attack plus. You've also got the new Leviamon here who can just eat through bunches of stuff as well as source strip things at the same time. And so you just have this this wide array of options at your fingertips as long as you have the cards in trash. You'll notice that the deck also runs a couple copies of the Cherubimon Ace, and that's because it's something I forgot. Lucemon Chaos Mode, despite being a 13,000 DB Digimon, is only level 5, which means you could technically blast Digivolve into him and really ruin your opponent's day. Something else to just keep in mind, he's a level 5, not a level 6, and your level 6s allow him to become a little bit more crazy. Keep in mind, you are going to lose access to the effect to pop into another 7th Grade Demon Lord, so that's a calculated risk you need to take yourself. As far as security is concerned, you have some really nasty cards that your opponent could check and things like that are alive, as well as the Biting Crush, allowing you to either set up a Lucemon Chaos Mode or a Leviamon, with either of these options being checked in security. You also have this really cool tech of the Revive from Darkness, a card I haven't seen in a while, but Lucemon Chaos Mode's effect doesn't prevent you from using it if you destroy the Digimon. So you can use Lucemon Chaos Mode and destroy him, and then bring him back with Revive of Darkness, and then get his effect to play something on board. So you can essentially get 2 7th Grade Demon Lords for the price of 4 memory. Keep in mind that the Chaos Mode is not going to get his own play effect, but honestly, the all turns effect is what you're looking for anyway. Similar to the Revive from Darkness, there's also 2 copies of the Deathclaw, where you can just pop your Lucemon Chaos Mode on board, and then you can destroy an opponent's level 4 Digimon, and then depending on whatever other 7th Grade Demon Lord you bring out, you can just pop something else, or pretty much everything else, in the case of things like Leviamon. And yeah, it's just a nice way to get rid of lots of threats at one time. And so if you're a fan of the 7th Grade Demon Lords cards, but you're not really interested in like the Ogdomon package, then give Lucemon Control a shot. And so with that, we're gonna wrap up the 4th week of events for the BT17 Secret Crisis meta report over here in Asia. It's really cool to still see people exploring and like trying stuff out with decks where you've got things like mixing and matching in the case of the Leopardmon deck using the Leopardmon upper end and then like the Imperialdramon lower end, or just trying to take old formulas and reinvent them as far as like the Lucemon deck is concerned. Even better is that next week we're going to have even more cards in the mix with the release of the new Digimon Liberator starter decks in the form of the Vortex cards as well as the Puppet Trait cards. I'm really interested to see how those cards or those decks slot into the current meta and how they can be used to buff up some of the decks that are already out there. Anyways folks, I gotta go practice for EVO Japan. I'm gonna get out of here. Before you get out of here, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.